And seeing all the photos that you've been uploading to your social media and stuff, it looks incredible.
Thanks, I try,
Perfect. So, are you ready to start the interview?
Yeah, whenever you are. Here I am. There are you. So.
Amazing. You look incredible, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Likewise, I love your hair. I don't know if I would be brave enough to do that, but I love it.
It took a long time. It took 6 hours.
Oh, God.
Yeah, I actually need to take it out soon, which I'm not looking forward to. But
Yes.
Right, so let's get the interview started. I'm very much looking forward to this, and we've been planning it for so long. So I'm glad that we finally sorted it out. Right, so the first question is, where are you from?
Well, I'm originally from California, but at the end of the day, I'm not always sure where I'm from. It could be from Mars or Venus, or I've ended up spending a lot of my life traveling and lived in different places. Currently, I mainly reside in Norway. I've lived in Greece, lived for a period in Mexico, and done a lot of traveling in between. So I guess when it comes to where I'm from, what nationality I am, I'm a little bit of all the paths that I've taken along the way, and uh, that also regards language-wise, and expression. I have a little bit of my heart in a number of places. So including where you are, Lesbos, where I've lived for a long time. So.
How many languages do you speak?
Oh, I speak fluently about 4, and then about 5 or 6 others partially. So, and I love language. I see language as a way of opening doors, of learning new things, of meeting people. Because when you can speak with somebody, even to a limited amount in their mother tongue, there's just another way that you meet them and they meet you. So.
Definitely. I mean, that's the wonderful thing about music, and you perform in a lot of languages as well, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I guess it's just an expression. Even in a lot of my own text, my own songs, some poetry, I even mix the languages. And some things you can say in one language that you really can't find an equivalent for in another language. And sometimes you just need to say it in Greek or Spanish, or uh, and it expresses something else. It expresses a context, a part of your history, and not everybody will understand it, but at the same time, it may give them a kind of trigger to go, what is being said, and more interested in it as well. And then to those who know that language, it speaks to them in a special way as well.
I completely agree. There are certain descriptive terms in Greek that don't exist in English or German, or I'm sure a lot more languages, but these are the ones that I know. And
Yeah.
also, the way that words are said sometimes is perfect in one language and loses the meaning in a different language.
Absolutely.
I find
And even the tonality of language, like the way you emphasize certain words, or even the pronunciation of a certain word, just gives a feeling that is, even if it's translated literally, and even if there is an equivalent expression, it just doesn't give the same sense. And that's lovely to play with. And yeah.
No, it's amazing. I love the way that you play with languages in your songs, and there are very few musicians that do that, so it's something very special.
Yeah, and it comes to, like, even a lot of I guess there's not one genre of music I play. I mean, I do have this one that I fall back to as kind of a singer-songwriter. It's a narrative voice, the narrator telling a story, which could be reminiscent of, country, but old type of ballads, like a bard that's telling a story. Um, but then there's like feelings that you get when you play a Greek style, and then mix Greek style Oriental music with Latin American, and it's just these feelings that are a mixture, and it comes out in both the language, the text, the words, but also in the feeling that's expressed by mixing it, and then suddenly going over to jazz, and it's just like I feel it's to just lock myself down to one thing is not who I am, because I think anybody who's lived with a type of hyphenated identity, let's say Greek British or Norwegian American or Mexican American, they have several identities, and that is the wholeness of who they are. And why should one only express the one facet when one in and of themselves is multifaceted in that experience? And I think most humans experience that they can be one person in one context and have one expression and have another one, and we often box these in. We put ourselves within stereotypes, and stereotypes are not one of my favorite things. So use all your expressions, be entirely who you are, and that's what I try and do in my art and my music, what I write. So
your music is definitely as diverse as you are, and it's honestly incredible. That was an amazing answer, by the way, to such a small question. Moving on to the next question, and this I'm so interested in to see what your reply will be, is what sort of activism have you been involved in?
Oh, it's taken me years to realize that I've been an activist, and it's mostly because other people have told me that I've been an activist or described me as an activist. I would describe myself, well, surprising to some, I'm quite asocial. I get worn out by large social contexts, and I like uh, those meetings that happen, but I'm also a hypersensitive person. I when I see someone suffering, I want to do something about it. And my life has made me witness to, unfortunately, a lot of suffering, both that I've experienced myself and that I've seen in others. And I guess one of the things that I worked with a lot of people on the street, a lot of people with dealing with poverty, a lot of people dealing perhaps with addiction problems, and seeing the way their lives are affected by this affects me personally. I take it personally. And so I end up saying, well, how can I create more understanding for these people? And I guess one of the groups I focused on for a long time here in Norway, and which I had a lot of contact from the first time I came to Greece, were the Romani people. And just listening to how people speak of the Romani, the Roma, vernacularly often called gypsy. And there are basically two sides that this falls on. And one side is the positive side, the saying, oh, gypsy jazz, oh, gypsy dance, oh, gypsy music. And the other side is that these are poor, these are thieves, these are dirty. And yet there's an entire historical and social context which has caused the Roma people to be stigmatized throughout their time since they came to Europe. They were the other, they were nomadic. And I learned Romani from the Roma people. And when you when you realize how they express themselves, who they are, you meet the person inside. And I guess one of my first forms of activism, which became publicly known, is after so many uh, newspaper articles and in the media, things against the Roma people just in general, clear stereotypes, clear racism. I sat down in earlier life with just a small sign that said, "My friend," and pointed to them. I sat down on the street with them, and it caused such a reaction. And I guess that's the first time that I really, that people really started calling me an activist, but it was such a simple thing. It was only to show that this is a fellow human being. This is in fact my friend that you're writing in commentaries and on the internet and in newspapers and even politicians, even the police saying, things about them, stereotypes about them that statistics or documentation could not prove. But it was, and I think when it comes to stereotypes and prejudice and even racism, so much of it is latent. It is within us, and we're often unconscious of it. And the simple act of sitting down and saying, "This is my friend. Are you going to talk to my friend or about my friend this way?" And that really, I guess this was around 2012 or 13 that this kind of became publicly known. But it was really, the thing is whether it has to do with the poor, homeless people, people who are discriminated because of their color, the victims of war, refugees. It's just seeing the humanity. And what I've really tried to do in what I've said, in talks, in art, in music, is to show the humanity of these people, to bring out the empathy, which I believe lives within us as human beings, to see when the other suffers, we suffer. And if you want to call that activism, then it's activism. And I guess I'm an activist. And um, but I haven't really been able to put that label on myself kind of until others have called me that, calling me names. But I guess in the end, there is a lot of activism in what I do. But for me, it really is about causing reflection about what it means to be human and what it means to treat others with humanity.
Wow, what to say about that? You're completely right. Everything you said is completely right. Society and the confines of our little groups always make us hate other people, whoever that might be at the time. But I don't think you should see activism as a bad thing or as a label that you don't want to take on, because it just means that you're actively making a change, actively showing that these are also human beings, actively speaking your mind. It's a wonderful thing. And if more people actually just sat down with these groups, whoever they might be, they would realize that they're very, very similar. There aren't that many differences between any of us. We're all human. And I love how you portrayed that.
I guess, activism, the word, you'll understand this in Greek. Not everybody will understand this, but I guess one of the greatest compliments I got when I was uh, particularly active in helping asylum seekers, refugees on Lesbos. There were rumors going around that I spoke too many languages and I was probably an agent. And the word is, and somebody said to a good friend of mine from Lesbos, "Well, don't you know this person is praktoras? They're an agent." And the person said, "Yes, that's exactly what they are. They're praktoras. Somebody who who does something, who engages, who is an agent of change." And that is what I want to be, to change our hearts and minds, so to say. And it's being active, proactive, and actively choosing to express something because we want to make a world that is more open and generous. And sometimes that means you have to say it. We've heard so many uh, examples of, let's say, during the Second World War, what happens when one does not speak up for the neighbor who may be a Jew, who may have a different sexual orientation, a different gender, they may be Roma. And when you do not do something, the act of not doing something is actually an act in itself. And sometimes we must take responsibility for our apathy, what we have not done. And thus, activating oneself, being active, being an activist is not a bad thing. It does annoy some people. Not everybody is happy that you do it, but somebody must speak out. Somebody must speak up for humanity, for human dignity. So I try.
Definitely. I never thought of the double meaning of that word before, because you always hear it like mystikos praktoras, like secret agent. But if you just break the two words up, the praktoras has a completely different meaning.
Yeah, exactly. It's beautiful language, and you understand this, Eleni. This is great. Few people that I could say that to.
Yeah. Right. So moving on to our next question is, what do you want to express with your art?
I guess I've kind of answered that question in many ways, but I guess the most important thing to me is to express diversity of life and to create reflection. Art, I see as something, it's not technique always, but it is the feeling, the emotion that it causes. The reaction, even if it's something like, oh, I don't like that. And then one must ask themselves, well, why don't you like that? What does it do within you? And I think that's what true art does. It creates an emotional reaction to something. It could be to beauty and say, oh, that is so beautiful. And one could reflect on I would say the world, like this is the beautiful face, the aesthetics of a landscape. And on the other hand, the turmoil of war and poverty being expressed can also create that. But it causes us, hopefully, to reflect on what our values are, what we want out of life. And I guess it is, in the end, I want to create reflection. And it's not necessarily what I express, which is important. There are ideals, there are thoughts, there are experiences which are expressed, but it is in the end to create that reflection or that room for reflection.
That's beautiful. I mean, the next question is kind of following on from that is, can you talk to us a bit about your visual art as well as your verbal and vocal art? So are there different reasons why you'd express yourself artistically in that way, or do they express different emotions?
I guess the source of when I make an art piece, a song, a text, poetry, is an emotion that I have. I experience an emotion. I experience I experience something that moves me, and I want to. I guess it's just the way I am, and when it comes to I mean, I have hundreds, probably thousands of little small pieces of paper, napkins, whatever, all over this world, that I observe something, I reserve an interaction, I observe a prejudice, I observe love or experience love, and I have this need to just express it in some way. And the majority of this is never going to be seen. I don't even know where a lot of this stuff is. Sometimes I just find, oh, here's a pile of tiny pieces of paper. Oh my God, I wrote this beautiful poem. I always date and put the time when I wrote this. But it is taking my experience, my emotional reflection or reaction, and my personal reflection on that, and giving it an expression. And I guess it is the movement of going from impression, me having been impressed by something, to expression. And so it's the inner process which comes out externally in the expression itself. And for me, it's just always been a variety of things. It's like, am I an artist or a writer or a musician? I guess in the end, I can just say I'm all of them. And a lot of my art is also performance art. It is, and some of my greatest experiences of performing that art may be for 10 people or 15 people, 20 people. Other times it may be for hundreds of people. But what happens in that moment, in me expressing what my impression has been, what my own reflection is, and seeing how that creates an impression on those people that maybe only few have seen it. That is the moment, because you can see the cogs turning in the head going, what does this mean? Or what the fuck? and and then you've come to that moment that you have communicated something. And for me, it doesn't matter if it's a poem, or something visual, if it's an art video, or music, a song. I mix them together, and I guess that mixture is also just an expression of how I am as a person, quite multifaceted.
I always find it incredible when you have a person that is just completely artistic. Everything that they do is art, whether it's a speech, whether it's a painting, whether it's their music. And I always find it fascinating how they decide what will become of this idea, whether it will be a song or a painting or a poem, how something in their head just goes, no, this is what this is going to be. This is what this idea will be. It's so fascinating and so complex. It's beautiful.
Well, there's this moment in time that you literally have to choose fearlessness, because when you're taking your soul and just ripping it up in front of an audience, which is really what's happening, it's a mixture of therapy and self-torture, because you're taking your innermost feelings and thoughts and you're just putting it out there. And at some point you have to say, I must do this fearlessly. I must do this regardless almost of the cost or the reaction, positive or negative, because this is a true expression of what I'm feeling, of what I believe, of what I have reflected in my life experience. And you just have to choose fearlessness. And it's at that moment that I can hide all of my drawings, whether they're just a shitty sketch, or there's something that I think this is an installation piece. But you just have to go, I see the value in this. And since I see the value in this, and I believe this could cause some form of reflection for the betterment of humanity, you just have to be completely fearless. Even in the face of some people, they don't like you. They will give you death threats, and you just must look them in the eye and say, I love you, and here's my expression of this love for you, and I wish you would also be a better person. But you must do this fearlessly, with no regard, as long as you know the core of what you're trying to express is something of value, something of love, something that hopefully will create some betterment in this world. You just must stand there and do it with no fear. Whew. Getting quite long-winded.
Well, you answered that question with a speech, and I feel like I'm gonna take a clip of your response, and every time that any of my artists are questioning themselves, I'm just gonna play you saying that, because that was incredible and so relatable. The whole mixture of expression and torture at the same time, it's the ideal way to like, what is going through your brain when you're being artistic? It is that.
Yeah.
It's a love of being able to express yourself, but also a fear and a hatred of what if it's not good enough. And
yep. That's what it's like being an artist. Yeah, it took me a long time to even say I'm an artist. Like, oh shit, I guess I am like one of those crazy artist types, and I've tried to like hide that for so long, and at some point, you just have to embrace it and go, that's who I am, and that's okay.
Again, like activism, it really isn't a bad thing. There, artists and activists will cause certain people to have a stereotype in their head about you, but it will also cause other people like you to feel connected to you and to want to see your art, to talk to you, to be invested in you. So, yeah, it's funny how it just depends on the perspective of whose perspective it is, what the word actually means, whether it's
Yeah.
positive or negative. Right, well, after that bombshell of an answer, let's go to the next question. This is a really difficult one that I always ask my artists is, have you felt any discrimination due to your sexuality or gender identity?
Well, when it comes to having felt any discrimination because of my gender or sexuality, um, the answer is yes. I have experienced that. Yet it's also quite a multifaceted answer. Um, Having experienced life in its different forms and sides, um, when one realizes um, the result of, for example, a patriarchal worldview that one has been raised in, the ideas of masculinity, the ideas that the ideas of femininity or gender in general, and the stereotypes we're often pushed into. And when one, having lived in the one world and having gone on to a new life, it is so spontaneous, the differences in how one relates to um, one's body. When one realizes that one, in a way, suddenly becomes a sex object, that how one dresses, the size of one's breasts become suddenly something very important to some people and cause a reaction that I think many who have a masculine identity or male identity would actually have good of knowing or experiencing uh, um, being objectified as a woman, because it is sickening. It is sickening the way people change their tones of voices, the patronizing, the small patronizing ways that one is suddenly spoken to, the fact that one thinks that they can um, touch you, touch your body in ways that they might never ever do if one had a male gender identity. And so, having seen the world as I often have and experienced it um, from, let's say, a variety of sides, is um, it's a shock, and it's also very enlightening as to seeing the structure of the patriarchal worldview. Um, um, I guess I bring this up in one of my performance pieces called This Patriarchy. Um, Realizing for many years, I've worn different clothes and perhaps I felt myself different for most of my life. I mostly realized that because others told me. But in experiencing myself as I am, as a woman, um, has also brought with it things where people tell you what you can and cannot wear, tell you how to do your hair, what you can and cannot say, make up the rules so we might play in their little game of pathetic lies. And they shut down again and again the one who tries to tell them when it's time to stop, because some think a cock puts the one on top. Well, goddamn, I say, to things the way they be. And I ask you all to join me in crushing this patriarchy. That is an expression of the shock of how men often treat women, but it's also a shock in how women will treat other women. The patriarchy, toxic masculinity, is not just about the men, which I also speak of early on in this poem, in this piece. It's also about how women treat other women and say that, oh, your shirt's a little bit too low cut. Oh, should you have your hair like that? And it's something that is so embedded in how we are raised that I think many of us, men, women, and anything in between, are unaware of these mechanisms. And so that's a long answer to the question. And yes.
That's such a beautiful answer. You actually made me cry a little bit. You are an incredible speaker, and your words will bring thousands of people together, honestly. And I completely agree with your answer. I've said for a very long time that women are also at fault for how women are treated. And how that's come about is a very, very long and complicated history of the world. But yeah, it is something that does need to change. Right. Moving on to the next question before I start crying again. How important do you think the journey of an artist is? Because you have gone through an incredible journey through your history as an artist, which I've been very fortunate to see the last 5 years of. How important do you think it is?
Oh, the journey is the core. I mean, it's the source of, the first songs I wrote as a child, and I look back at them and must laugh. And as a teenager, like, what did I truly know of love and loss? And, you're just taking catchphrases and you're just putting them together in a way that sounds okay. And you make a little melody and, and, and then 20 years later, you're like, oh my fucking God, I didn't know shit. And it has to do with both the darker sides and the lighter sides of life. There are some things which come with life experience, and it's not that in the moment as a teenager that experience is not real and is 100% what you're living, and that expression is not what you're truly feeling. However, when you realize that life goes in cycles and in waves, and the loss you experience one day will be replaced by a loss 5 years later. It could be the loss of a friend. It could be somebody to suicide. It could be a job you didn't get. It could be a discrimination you face. It could be a love you found. And then at that moment, that is the center of your world. But I guess age and the journey over time just shows how diverse life is. And there are things that I can write and understand today, even in my own past, in a totally different way than I did then in the moment. One text or song which I wrote many years ago, and it applies even more today, is, well, I've been around. One thing I found, I know a lot less than I think I used to know. And that's the journey.
Yeah, wisdom and hindsight are beautiful and terrible things.
Yeah.
I do agree though, the older you get, the less you know, because you're
Yeah.
sure of everything as a kid, as a teenager. You're like, I have everything understood. And then you get older and you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah. It's a lovely revelation, though. It's like, it's also freeing. It's like, oh shit, I've just been flying by the seat of my pants. Like, I've been making this up as I go along.
Yeah.
And that's life sometimes. La vita è bella.
Yeah, the more you learn, the less you know. It's a beautiful irony.
Yeah.
Moving on to the next question. What do you want to teach the younger generation through music? Because obviously you're a mum, and I really wanted to hear your answer to this.
Oh, I guess uh, when it comes to what I want to teach the younger generation, I feel like a mixture of being very young and like an old woman, and at the same time, simultaneously. So um, I guess it comes back again to reflection, and the other thing is teaching. Um, and it's not something you can really teach, but I guess expressing the idea, be yourself, just be who you are, like in your expression. And I've hung around the artist community and musicians for so many years, and there's so much focus on uh, being technically right, taking all the right steps, making the right connections, getting the right network so that you can make that hit and make your first million. And along the way, so many real end up losing what their expression is, who they are in that, because they need to fit into the mold so they'll get radio play. Don't be too provocative. Uh, and so you can sing the same chorus, 100 times over about love this and that and partying and all that stuff. And what in the end, it may be fun to dance to. And that's great. That has its purpose as well. But so many people leave behind who they are and what their expression truly is in order to, I guess, sell themselves to the art industry, the music industry. And I guess like the most important thing for me as a mother is I want strong, independent children. I want my kids to disagree with me. And I want them to disagree with whoever in the world they want to disagree with, and to agree with who they want to agree with, but in a reflected way, expressing who they are. And I would say that to any young musician or artist, like, be who you are. Don't make art that is palatable to those who are in power. We must speak to power. We must use our art to speak to power, because it's the powerful, and often men and the rich, who need to be spoken to. We need to be able to, don't kick to the side and don't kick down, but you can kick up, and do that with your art. And you will do that in truly expressing who you are, regardless of whether they like you or not. I don't know if that's good advice, but that's my advice. So be yourself fearlessly.
It's great advice, and there's so much more meaning behind "be yourself" than just those words. And you're right. I mean, music schools, music teachers, they teach you to be part of the mold. They teach you how to make a vague amount of money if you're lucky. They don't
Yep.
teach you how to be yourself. They teach you how to be a carbon copy of whatever they think is the right thing to be.
Yep.
I don't know if you saw, but there's a bill that just passed in Greece that basically the government are enforcing. I think I have all the information correct about this. The government are enforcing a law against art. So any art that's anti the current political government or something that they don't agree with, they can have removed, whether that's painting, graffiti, music videos, and everyone is completely and utterly outraged about it, of course, because it is controlling the populace via art.
Wow.
Yeah, it only.
Exhibition.
I only heard this yesterday, so it's very new. But yeah, art is a form of expression, and they are now about to control all of it, which is terrifying.
Wow.
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, that is scary. And I guess that's there's a very fine line between controlling hate speech and controlling unpopular opinions, because there can be, like from I guess, a judicial point of view, it's like, where does that line go? And I guess I don't always have an answer to that, but when you see a government, and now I don't know the background for this, but we have throughout history, this has happened, anything that is anti-government of the time, when it's taken away, when books are burned, when art is burned, destroyed, you have to set a big question mark behind that and the reasons for it. We need to be able to use our voices as artists, and sometimes it will be critical of the powers that be, and often should be.
I think that the reason that this is happening is because they're scared. Honestly, they're scared of the wider population rising up against them. They're scared of the anarchists because they've put loads of other things forward to do with protests and anarchy in general. But this is not the way. Like, I feel like they're trying to push the Greek population to its limits. We will see what will happen, I guess. But yeah.
Yeah.
Right, so next question is, what is the next step for you? What are you up to? What are you planning?
Oh, I have no clue. I mean, who really does anyway? I do have some art exhibitions coming up in Norway, which I'm happy about, which will mainly be forms of visual art. But again, what my art is, it's a whole mixture of things. So multifaceted art exhibitions. I do have an album which I hope will be out by the end of February this month, 2021. It's a collection of live recordings, more recent and also some from the past. It's called Lives, S in parentheses. And I'm hoping that once the Corona situation has bettered, that there will be some more live performances coming up in the future, of course. And I'm looking forward to that time, because that is it's excruciating to do, and it's also where that meeting, that magic happens, where you get to do therapy live on stage, and it touches somebody. So I don't know in which order all of these things are coming, but I'm always active. I have I'm actually finishing up. I'm almost done with another manuscript for a book in Norwegian. There's a collection of poetry from actually several years ago, which should be published later on this year in Norwegian dialect. So not a great international seller, but yeah, I'm always working on expression, and at the end of the day, most of my expressions, they really have nothing to do with whether I make money off of it. I remain rather poor, and that's just the way it is. But the expression in itself, I find valuable. So, you know, what comes, and I both have a plan and don't have a plan, and uh, and that's the way it is. So.
Yeah, if you could send me all of that, I'll share it around, send it, even the manuscript, like when the poetry is out, I know quite a lot of Norwegian people that would love to read it, even if I can't. But, right, so this is actually our last question, are there any artists that you would recommend?
Oh, I guess the one off the top of my head is look at the voice, and I mean the voice in several ways, of Sinead O'Connor. Look at what is both in and behind what she has to say. Look for artists that express some value that's worth listening to. I mean, there's music that we listen to for the pure entertainment value, nice rhythms, and that's lovely. But there are some artists that stand out over a longer period of time. Look at Nina Simone. Look at the music of Sam Cooke. Look at those people, those artists that have been pioneers and created new paths for other artists. You know, I don't follow along. I don't even have Spotify. I'm on Spotify. I don't even have Spotify. I really don't. I listen to such a weird variety of music, like Greek folk music and like, you know, whatever. It's like, and you know, I mix that stuff into what I perform, but it's so I don't really have any new recommendations, but look at some of those artists, find those artists that have maybe caused a stir, and see when they at what point and the reasons why perhaps they were muzzled. Look into that. Look at the history, and look into those who have made history, even if they didn't do it in their lifetime or they weren't recognized for it, that had something important to say about the state of things in the present. And if a musician, if an artist is a prophet, it is not because they are able to foresee the future, but is that they speak to the state of things as they are now in the present. And I think these people that I mentioned, Sinead O'Connor, Nina Simone, Sam Cooke, were some of those artists who did that.
I feel like you've given everyone homework.
Good. That's the point. I mean, a lot of, like, you know, I've started in some of my performances singing this song in Sicilian about a donkey, and it's like, oh, when my wife died, I didn't cry, but when my donkey died, I did. But this goes back to an entire context of what having a mule or a donkey meant during feudalism on Sicilia. Like, do your homework, read Giovanni Verga, read about the history of injustice, what feudalism did, and see how we also have feudal systems today. It just looks different. Look into the history of injustice. History is full of it. And it's full of people who have tried to stand up and change and do something about this injustice. So do your homework, read your history books. Like, it's not just like, look into the context, understand the mechanisms, the systems that are at work and have been there throughout history, because that's really what we want to change. We want systemic change. There's individual examples of injustice and discrimination, but what we need is to change the way society works. So do your history lessons, go to school, and be yourself.
Christine, this has been an amazing interview. Thank you so much for taking the time to do it.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
No worries. Mwah. I will see you very soon.